today's tutorial is all about oven safety. So we're going to be looking at different ways that you can keep yourself and everyone in your house safe when you're using the different parts of the oven. When placing things in and out of the oven, there's a couple of things you can do to keep yourself safe. The first one is making sure you're wearing oven gloves. It's very tempting to use tea towels to get hot trays out of the oven, but these just don't provide as much protection to your hands, so oven gloves are a must. Secondly, the way that you bend down to the oven. If you're in a standing position and open the door with your face close to the oven, there's a good chance that you're going to be hit with a lot of heat and steam and you could possibly scald yourself. So the best way to approach the oven is to bend down at the knees and then open the door that way. And then remove your tray and close it with your hands as well. It's very tempting to use your feet to kick the door closed. That's not a very safe way of closing the oven. You also need to think about who is in your kitchen whilst you're working. Very young children and pets can prove to be quite big hazards in the kitchen. As well as the hygiene issues behind having animals in the kitchen and the chance of their fur going into your food, they're a safety risk to you as well. They can become a tripping hazard. You might not see that they're there and you might be working with a knife or carrying something hot from one surface to another and trip over an animal and potentially injure you and them. So where possible, remove them from the kitchen before you start cooking. Young children are also a similar risk to you. They can also be a distraction. So you might be in the middle of cutting something and a young child is distracting you and you could end up hurting yourself because you're not concentrating on the task in hand. But they also prove a big risk to themselves. They don't understand the risks and the dangers as an older child or young adult might. So they might reach up onto an oven and inadvertently pull down a hot pan of sauce all over them. It's happened before, unfortunately, and children have been severely injured like this. So wherever possible, make sure that young children aren't in the kitchen whilst you're cooking. When you're working on the top part of your oven, the hob, it's really important that you think about the placement of your saucepans. The handle is particularly important. Looking at this pan here, you can see this handle is overhanging the edge of the oven. If I was busy working in the kitchen, moving from surface to surface while something was cooking in the pan, and I walked past and knocked this, then obviously I'm potentially going to really injure myself with something very hot that spills out onto my feet, which is another reason why it's so important to make sure that your feet are covered when you're working with the oven. But another way to reduce the chance of an accident like this happening is just turning the pans so that the saucepans overhang the other way. They're not overhanging into your working area. We also need to think about the utensils and tools that you use whilst you're cooking. Now, generally speaking, this is when you're cooking on the hob as opposed to the oven. Basically, when you put something in the oven, it stays there until it's cooked and it doesn't need any further intervention with you using tools. When you're cooking something on the hob, however, generally you might have to stir or remove things or add things in. So there's lots of different pieces of tools and equipment that we can use to help with that. And they have different shapes, forms, they're made of different materials and they're used for different jobs. But it's important that you understand how the properties of those materials affect the tool. So what I mean by this is, if we look at wooden utensils, most of you should know wood burns. So if you used to leave this over a naked flame or in the heat, so if you left it in a saucepan to go and do another job, there's a good chance that after a while the wood is going to start to burn, which is an obvious fire risk. So once you've done using the utensil, make sure that you remove it and leave it on the side where it's not going to pose a fire risk to you. Plastic doesn't necessarily cause a fire straight away, but it does melt quite easily. So for the same reasons, don't leave it in the pan. Now, metal isn't going to melt or start a fire too easily, but it is a very good conductor of heat. So if you leave a metal utensil in a pan and then go to do another job, then come back to it and pick up your metal utensil, there's a good chance, even though the handles have been protected with some plastic generally, if you've left it in there for any length of time, there is a good chance that the heat will reach the handle and you're going to end up burning yourself. So just as a general rule, make sure when you're using utensils on the hob, you remove them before going on to do another job. Something else you need to be considerate of when you're cooking on the hob or any part of the oven is other flammable items around you. Especially if you're cooking multiple items, it can be easy to put things down and forget where you've put them. A tea towel, for example, could just be placed next to the oven when another part of the hob is already on. This is then a fire risk, so just make sure that the oven is clear of anything else whilst you're cooking. It's also really important to clean down the hob and the oven after you've used it. Obviously for hygiene reasons we want to remove any dirt and bacteria, but for safety reasons too. If you were to leave some debris of food on the hob and then to cook again, there's a chance that that piece of food could catch light. So make sure you get into the habit of cleaning down and leaving your oven really sparkly and clean. To recap, there's several things you can do to make sure you keep yourself and everyone around you safe when you're using the oven. Always use oven gloves when getting hot things in or out of the oven to protect your hands. When you open the door, make sure your face is away from the heat. Ensure you're wearing closed shoes in case of any spillages. Remove any young children or pets. Turn the pan handles away from the edge. Remove utensils from hot pans when you're not using them. Keep the oven clear at all times, and once you're finished using the oven, make sure you clean it down. You should now have the knowledge you need to be able to complete the oven safety section of Workbook 1.